With regard to climate, I think that there will continue to be a great leadership coming out of Brussels. So it's a shame that we've lost the UK. The recent government has been backtracking a little bit on climate. It's not the government of yesteryear that was really taking a leadership position. So from a climate perspective, I think we'll be okay. And there are many governments, and the French have really stepped up to the plate, and of course the Germans are continuing. And even some of the Central and Eastern European countries are now really stepping up to the plate as well, even though they don't always admit it. I think the key balance of power issue is going to be how this is going to affect the European economy. And as I worked quite a lot on green growth issues, I think what we need to try to figure out now is how we're going to be able to balance ourselves towards a greener economy, towards innovation, towards investment, and not start to get risk averse because of this change within the European spectrum and the political change, which is really creating some uncertainty.
I mean, risk averse, is it still seen in some circles that it's risky to be investing in greener technologies and cutting carbon?
I think it's not necessarily that it's seen as risky, but I think it's a question of where are we politically focusing our time and effort. The refugee crisis has been incredibly intense and has focused member states continuously over the last few years. In addition now, the Brexit vote, I think there's a great deal of uncertainty as to what really will be the impact. We've all watched what's happened with the fall of the sterling, with the fall of the pound, the fall of the British economy, which is really starting, the split within Britain itself. How is that going to shake out and have an impact also on the European economy? So it's not the fact that actually people think that maybe it might be risky. I think the question is everyone's attention is elsewhere now, and yet we have a climate crisis too. How do we bring climate back to the forefront? How do we continue to speak about climate in an integrated approach, which is thinking about how we actually create a system that works, both in terms of our energy system as well as in terms of our economic system. And from an energy system perspective, what we've been working a lot on is energy efficiency. We've really been thinking about how energy efficiency can be one of the greatest pillars of our energy system. The European Union has really put forward an energy efficiency first campaign. We've seen that we can offset gas imports from Russia, for example, by investing in buildings regulations and renovating. By 2030, we actually would completely cut off our imports of gas. So there are ways in which we can start to invest in a brand new development of our energy system as well as our economic system. But will leaders be willing to have those discussions now while they're being pulled in a direction of uncertainty because of what's happening here? It's all still to be determined. On the other hand, you see that that Juncker and the European Commission, as well as European leaders, have been very quick to say, we will continue to stand strong, stand united as a European Union. And I'm hopeful that actually those signals are going to tell, unfortunately, the English population and Britain at large that actually Europe does mean business, and it will continue to be economically unified as well as unified in other ways.
And the Welsh, don't just blame the English for this.
Yes, no, sorry, you are very right.
And then, I mean, just finally, in terms of European leadership, Germany's got a new climate plan, I understand, coming out shortly. How much of this is all focused on what Angela Merkel says and what the German government says in terms of maintaining a focus on climate change? They host this annual meeting, the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, which is I think, starting this Sunday. So they're clearly, right at the heart of trying to keep things ticky along. But, is it down to Germany in a sense to show that leadership within the EU now?
I think it's interesting because if you look at Spain, for example, where we had the highest number of unemployment, the only area of growth was in renewables. So even the Spanish government realizes, and now obviously we have a conservative Spanish government as well, but even the Spanish government has realized that green growth does mean that you can actually decouple yourself from emissions and invest in new technologies and bring jobs to the economy. So although, yes, Germany being a very large member state, next to another very large member state, which is Poland, which obviously hasn't been showing exactly the same type of enthusiasm with regard to climate change, you can see that most of the European member states, whether it's a conservative or a Labour government, are still pushing for more innovative green technologies in order to boost their economies. So I don't think it's one leader anymore. I actually think there's a buy-in from across Europe. The question is priorities. And as I was saying before, I think that will really be the discussion now. You know, there are economies that may decide to wait a little bit, not go as fast. And of course, because of the plunge of the pound, I think the question now will be what will be the euro? How is that going to be impacted? And then what is our currency valuation in comparison to China, the United States, and elsewhere in terms of our trade flows?